So I screwed up. Forgot to film an intro for Lake Chatuge. Don't got one. Drove all the way back to Idaho. Still don't have one. So here it is. Let's roll some clips. So one of the huge keys for me this week, just like most places we go, anytime it's an offshore, even if it's up against the bank, is Humminbird Solix station is what we'll call it. So both Solix 12s and the HD Lake Master chart that we got for this tournament. Lake Master went out this year and graphed this entire lake for us so that we had this chart for the Angler of the Year Championship, and you can see how much incredible detail there is in these contour lines, and the fact that I could highlight different depths, and you can see these areas. You can see a lot of my tracks. I still have them on here, so I'm giving you guys like the goods of what actually went down this week. But if we zoom in here, you can see these contour lines. And notice how they're wide here and they're wide here and they get real tight. Well, what you have is you have this main creek channel coming in, and you can see how it wraps around and it hits right here and creates this steep contour line, and that's where the fish were pushing the bait up, and that's where they were ambushing the bait. And anytime I could find those types of contour lines relating to these flats on both sides, there would always be spotted bass next to those steep contour lines everywhere throughout the entire lake. And so once I got that dialed in, I could literally just drive around and look wherever there would be a little bit of a flat, and then there would be steep contour lines, and that's where those spotted bass were feeding. It's where they're relating, and you know, they would use those contour lines, like I always say, as their highways, and then they would push up and feed. So definitely a huge key for me, being able to not only find the places during practice, but also be able to fish new water during the tournament, because I spent a lot of time during the tournament fishing new water every day, and caught a lot of my big fish, including that big 5-pound largemouth, by fishing new water and looking at contour lines. We're idling right down that break that I just talked about, and you can see it's all soft bottom over here, harder bottom over here. It's all black, soft return. Here's the brush pile that I have marked right here, and you can actually see it's just off to our right side. It's not showing up on the left. It's right on the break on this right side. I can actually zoom in on that, and you can see a couple of the spotted bass that are suspended. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 fish suspended in that brush pile right now, and all that fuzziness on the side imaging and the down imaging is actually a lot of the bait sucked into that brush pile. And you can actually see here as we come off this drop, there's a few more fish suspended, a lot more bait here. So as I was talking about how those fish, they're pushing that bait up against those steep contours, and then they're ambushing them, and they're relating to those brush piles and those breaks and things along that. Even though maybe they're necessarily not sitting right inside of them, they're relating to them and using them to ambush the bait. Definitely the number one setup for me this week was this Stormarashi top walker. It's a size 13, and you can see I added a little feather treble to the back of it. It's got tons of teeth marks, and it's all beat up from this week. It's pretty bad. Need to swap the hooks out on it. But I was taking that and tying it to a 20-pound Seagar Rippin' monofilament leader, and then I was splicing that together right here with a Crazy Alberto knot to a 40-pound Seagar Smackdown braid, and then I've got it spooled up on a Daiwa Steeze 7-to-1 Big deal with this is the braid, super smooth. I can cast it a long ways, and this Daiwa Stize has the T-wing system, so it allows me to make super long casts, because when you open the bail, there's a lot less friction, so I can cast up to 30% further because of that less friction. And then the 7-to-1 allows me to be able to burn it in and make those casts when I need to, if the fish starts schooling somewhere and I need to burn it back in and fire that cast out. And then my favorite topwater rod, the Alpha Angler Slasher. It's a 610 medium, perfect length for me to be able to work this bait all day. I mean, I was throwing topwater not just in the morning and in the evenings, I was throwing it all day long. 12:30, 1 o'clock in the afternoon was actually my best bite for the topwater. You can't tell today, today's the day after the event. We got clouds rolling in, but during the event, it was all sunny and dead flat calm. And topwater played a huge role for not only me, but a lot of the guys in the top. And so definitely a big key for me this week, being able to make those super long casts, get that bait out there, working it across those brush piles, across the points, and those steep breaks that we talked about, all the places that those spots and those largemouth were ambushing the bait. And you know, it seemed like working it at a fairly fast pace was the key, and that was the deal. And that top walker, the 13 size, was able to push a lot of water, create a lot of commotion, and draw those fish up. Even all the way from 20 foot of water, those spots would come up and attack that bait, because they're feeding on blueback herring, shad, and the majority of that bait fish is above them. So they're looking up, they're feeding up, and that's why I think a topwater played a huge, huge key this week. Got him, big one. That's a big old spot right there, boys. One bait, rod reel setup that didn't get a lot of love this week, but one that did put a key largemouth in the boat on day one. Yeah, it's probably my second biggest fish of the day on day one. And I caught it on this beast right here. Alpha Angler hitter, 7.6, heavy action flipping stick, Daiwa Tatula SV 8-to-1. I like that fast gear ratio when I'm flipping, so I can make more casts, more opportunities. And I've got it spooled up with 25-pound Seaguar Tatsu fluorocarbon and a Molex Kento jig. It's a half ounce, excuse me, in one of the new pro colors we're coming out with, and then a Zoom Super Chunk Junior, green pumpkin, blue fleck. Just a good looking matching color, imitating a lot of the bluegill that are up there on the bank. And this was a setup that I didn't even throw in practice, never even pulled it out of my rod locker, just something I tied on before the first day of the tournament, because I knew I was gonna be fishing around some of these laydowns and wanted to have this option on my deck when that sun was out for any of those largemouth that I felt would get inside that thick, heavy, nasty cover. And so on day one, I had that largemouth where I had thrown my top water. I think I actually threw a big rat over it a couple times and never got a bite, and picked up this jig and flipped it up there down to the end of the laydown, let it sink down, boom, catch one, and it's almost a 3-pound largemouth. So, you know, even though it didn't get a ton of play, it was a key player on day one, getting that bigger bite for me. So definitely a fun way to fish. 7.6 heavy action flipping stick, Alpha Angler hitter, light enough tip, heavy enough backbone to get them out of that heavy cover. You can see these trees, a lot of them are like big, nasty pine trees. They got tons of branches and lots of little nooks and crannies for those fish to hide, and a lot of places for you to get stuck in. So you need need that heavy line, heavy rod to be able to get those fish out of there. Another setup that seemed to be a key and kind of the last and final hurrah for me was a drop shot. Heard me talk tons about it. Alpha Angler DSR. This one's red because this is actually the prototype rod that I approved for you guys. So this is my old original DSR. That's why it's red. But Alpha Angler DSR 610 medium light action rod, and same rod that I fish all my drop shot, smallmouth stuff on, largemouth. Pairing that up with a #2 VMC finesse Nico hook and a Zoom Pro Blue Neon Z3 swamp crawler, and running about 12 to 15 inch leader to a 3/8 ounce drop shot weight. And I was taking this actually in the mornings when you'd think that the topwater bite would be the best. Actually in the morning time, the drop shot was the best for me. A lot of the bait was down low, the fish seemed to be down low, and I was able to get in those places that I was catching them on topwater and kind of move around in my graph, move around the brush piles. They wouldn't necessarily be in the brush piles, but they would be relating to them, and I would see the fish on my graph, drop down on them, watch the fish follow it down, and then obviously nice light shakes, throwing it, as you can see, on Seagar Smackdown braid. This is 15-pound test, and then tied to an 8-pound Seagar Tatsu fluorocarbon leader and the Exist 2500. This is actually the older Exist. So in the old Exist, I like the 2500. In the new Exist, I go with the 3000 because they made it a little bit smaller frame. It's lighter, so you can go with the 3000 in the new one. But you can see here possibly, so see you've got a fish here. Here's actually you can see my drop shot right here on my graph. You can see me picking it up and down, up and down. So I would just kind of cruise around on the old treks, and I would kind of go from waypoint to waypoint of these brush piles, and when I would see the fish kind of relating to around the brush piles, as soon as I saw one, like I said, drop down. So coming into a brush pile right there. Looks like there actually may be a fish sitting at the bottom of it, at the base of it, right there. So you can see my bait falling down. Zoom in, so that's my bait falling down into the brush pile. You can see on the DI, we're coming into the brush pile here. So it's easier to decipher on the DI, but you can actually see that fish sitting right in the middle of the brush pile. Zoom in on it for you. Move my cursor a little so it's not blocking him. You can see that little round snowball. That's that fish that's sitting there in that brush pile. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that recap. I had a lot of fun this week on Lake Chatuge. We're gonna put these Alpha Angler rods away. We're gonna get on the road because I've got about a 40-hour drive home. It's gonna take us a little bit, and got a lot of cool things coming up here shortly that we will share with you guys. But for now, thank you guys for tuning in. Keep on a lookout, subscribe so that you guys don't miss the full series video coming out, driven by Go RVing. This one should be a lot of fun. Some cool, interesting fish catches. So yeah, hope you guys learned something, and stay tuned. Got more coming up.